Right, so we will get started. So a little bit today we are going to learn about long-term care planning. It's going to be a quick overview of long-term care planning. We will dig deeper into Medicaid and those type things as we go. Maybe some later on webinars on that. This is just a good overview topic to get everybody a little familiar with it. But if this is your first time tuning into a webinar with me, a little about me. I'm a graduate of the University of South Carolina. Undergrad, I have a degree in biology with a minor in chemistry, cognate in chemistry. I'm a graduate of the University of South Carolina School of Law, class of 2013. After graduating law school, I clerked for a judge here in Spartanburg County. And now I'm in private practice with a business law firm here in Spartanburg. And my main practice areas are estate planning, Medicaid planning, business planning. So that's kind of what my overall usual areas of practice are. So that's why I want to talk about this long-term care with you. So many people question, what is long-term care planning? So at some point during our life, a lot of us are going to need some type of long-term care. I know nobody wants to deal with this. I know it's not our goal to need this type of care, but a lot of us are going to need it. Sometimes you need nursing home level care, and sometimes you may just need a caregiver in your home, but it's important to understand how you're going to finance your long-term care needs should you need those in the future. And we don't want to wait until it's too late to think about this. We want to start thinking about it earlier on and making sure we're in the right age range to think about it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about long-term care insurance. And I know we have some people joining us who sell long-term care insurance. Your financial advisors and insurance people can help you out with this, but it is one of the tools we use with long-term care planning. So I definitely want to go over it and when I think you need it. We need to think about, are we planning for our elderly parents, our grandparents? When do we need to start planning for ourselves? And how do I protect my house and other assets? That's pretty much the gist of what we're going to talk about today. So long-term care insurance. This is a great policy to have if you get a good policy with long-term care insurance. I think it's understanding your policy is really crucial. But a lot of times with long-term care insurance, it'll help pay for at-home caregivers if maybe you don't need to go to a nursing home or that's something you're just really against. There's funds to help it pay for at-home caregivers as well as possibly nursing home costs. Typically, these are used, there's a limit on them. Sometimes it's 3 years, sometimes it's 5 years. It really depends on the policy. Insurance in general is governed by contract law. So when you get your policy, you want to read through it and make sure you understand it. And maybe that's the time you want to come see an attorney to help you understand it because it's contracts law. Insurance is contracts. So what is in that policy control? So your policy is different from someone else's. And that's important to have a good insurance financial advisor that can help you find the right policy for you as well. Some of the times it's great to use it. So if you're a person and you know you're never going to qualify for Medicaid, you just have way too many assets, or qualifying for Medicaid is not what you want to do because you don't want to have to go to certain nursing homes, certain care facilities. I think it's great to use long-term care insurance to know you have something to help cover those long-term care needs. It's also a good tool to have so you can plan for Medicaid. So if you have this long-term care insurance and it lasts 5 years, that can help you get past the look back period for Medicaid, which we'll talk about as we go. But it's definitely something that I think you want to consider and have that conversation with your attorney and with your financial advisor and insurance person to know, do I need long-term care insurance? But it's a great benefit to your family in a lot of ways because they know that your long-term care needs are going to be taken care of because long-term care costs is expensive. Nursing homes are expensive. You're paying $6,000, $7,000 a month for nursing home care. If you're looking at getting in-home sitters, like if you are looking at using like a caregiver service, those are usually going to range, from $15 to $20 an hour. And if you need more round-the-clock care at that point, it is definitely going to be very expensive. So that's where this long-term care insurance comes into play. Like any type of insurance, It is a gamble. And you hope you lose in this gamble in all reality, because you hope you don't need this long-term care insurance. You live to be 90 years old and you're healthy the whole time and you don't need it. But if you do need it and don't have it, that is definitely where the problem comes in. It's like life insurance in general. It's a gamble, but it's something you want to have in place in case you need it. So I think, it's a great conversation to have. If you know you're not going to qualify for Medicaid, it's definitely something you probably want to have in place to help your family. And then it's also a good tool to use when you're looking to qualify for Medicaid. The big thing about long-term care insurance is you have to make sure it's worth the financial investment as well, because depending on your age, and the premiums may be too high for you to really invest in it. So it's good to start thinking about these things way earlier on than what you probably want to. 40s, 50s are not too early to start thinking about this. When you hit 70, the premiums just may be too expensive. So you want to start thinking about it in your 40s, 50s. In today's time, you can get many policies as a basic life insurance policy, maybe a whole life policy that has like the rider for long-term care insurance and those type things to make the policy a little more valuable to you as well. But it's definitely something you want to start thinking of much more in advance than when you want to, because none of us want to think about this when we're only in our 40s, but it's definitely something we have to consider for our family. A lot of times I have questions on, won't Medicare cover any long-term care costs? And I think a lot of people are confused in the difference with Medicare versus Medicaid. So I just want to take a minute to point that out. Medicare is insurance for those over 65 years old, and it does not cover long-term care costs like a nursing home. Typically, Medicare is going to cover if you need to go to a long-term care facility for like a rehabilitation facility for physical therapy and those type things for about 30 days. Medicare is not going to cover the cost of your nursing home. It's just pretty much an insurance plan from the government for health insurance reasons. It will cover a lot of your medicines and those type things, but it's not covering those long-term care costs. Medicaid is a different program, and it's dependent upon your financial situation. But if you qualify, you will cover long-term care costs if you qualify for the program. So Medicare is more like just your basic insurance to help you pay for medical bills, prescription drugs, and those type things, where Medicaid is where you're going to get that long-term care, but it is dependent upon your financial situation. In understanding Medicaid, it's a two-pronged test. The first test is something that, an attorney is not going to be able to help you with or anything. This is the physical mental requirements. You have to meet certain mental and physical requirements to qualify for the need for long-term care insurance. You have to be, in a sense, incapacitated in certain ways. You have to meet these qualifications. How you can meet these qualifications is through your medical diagnosis, talking with your doctor. If you already are having to go into a nursing home and those type things, that's when you're meeting the qualifications physically. The side that we're going to talk more about today is the financial side. So with the financial side, inside of it is also a two-part test. Medicaid is going to look at your income level and your asset level. So both of those things are things Medicaid is going to look at. So the income limit, this is money you're getting in from Social Security, retirements, dividends, anything that's an income stream to you. The limit for the spouse needing care is only $2,400. So that's not a lot of money a month. They have a very low income limit. Now, the spouse has unlimited income if it is in his or her name. For instance, if one spouse has a large 401k and they're not the one needing care, then they're getting the income from their 401k. It's not going to hurt the spouse that needs Medicaid. We call it the well spouse and the spouse needing care typically. So the well spouse can have unlimited income if it is his or her income stream. And there's different ways we can turn assets into income stream if we need to do that with planning. But the big thing to know is for the person needing care, it's a $2,400 income limit. That doesn't mean they're not going to qualify. There's different things we can do, but that's just the overview of it. For the asset limit, these are your assets. This is like what's in your bank account, what's in your mutual funds, those type things. What all assets do you have? Life insurance policy values, all of that. is a $2,000 limit for the spouse needing care, and the well spouse has a $63,000 limit for the well spouse. Some assets are exempt. Things like a house, your personal property, and your car do not count against you in qualifying for Medicaid. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be a lien possibly at the end of your estate and estate recovery, but we're not going to talk about that side of things right now. Just understand the basic asset limit, $63,000 for the well spouse minus those exemptions like your house and car. So, you have too many assets to qualify for Medicaid. How do we look at planning for this? So Medicaid has what's known as a 5-year look back period, which means any transfers you made in that 5-year period, Medicaid will need to know about to determine your eligibility. So it's pretty much not wanting you to make gifts in that 5-year period, or it could possibly penalize you or disqualify you from Medicaid eligibility. So for example, if you give, say it's 2019, and you give your daughter $100,000 in cash, and then you want to apply for Medicaid today, they're going to see that gift and they're going to have issues with it. They may penalize you, say, oh, well, you're still going to qualify, but we're penalizing you, and you're going to have a penalty period, which means they're not going to pay for care during that period. So it's important to understand that Medicaid has the right to look back 5 years. So any transfers you make during that time are going to be looked at. It doesn't mean if you went on a cruise and spent $10,000 on yourself for this cruise, you're going to get in trouble. No, you can still do things for yourself during this time period. You can buy furniture, you can do what you need to do, but it's looking at gifts. And the real thing Medicaid looks at is, did you try to give away your assets so you would qualify for Medicaid in this 5-year period? If you do normal things like contributions to your church, your charities of your choice, and you continue to do those on a regular basis, that's usually not going to be as much of an issue as looking and seeing that you're making these big, large gifts every now and then to family members. It's not something regular like your tithes every month. But it is important that they're going to look at all this, and they will go through your accounts and ask detailed questions of you when you're going to apply for Medicaid. So it's important to understand that they're going to comb through all of this, and they're going to ask you, and you're going to have to explain what happened. And if it was a gift, then that 5 years that could disqualify you or could give you a penalty period. Doesn't mean for sure you're not going to qualify, and there are exemptions and always appeals and those things, but this is just the basic rule. So what does it mean having this 5-year period? If you're thinking about long-term care plan and you're thinking about the need for Medicaid, you need to make a plan well before you actually need Medicaid to get the best benefit. So in thinking about this, it's always important to look at things like irrevocable trust, where you can put your assets in an irrevocable trust, and that way you can save your assets for your family. I'm looking at things like life estate deeds, which would mean that I own my house for my life, and then at my passing, it goes to the person that's listed on the deed. And that would be a way to protect your house. Changing how income is held. So we may need to transfer assets from spouse to spouse. And one thing is there can be unlimited gifts between spouses. So sometimes we use the spouses, if there's too much asset, we put it into an income stream that gives the well spouse unlimited income, which are not unlimited, but they have that unlimited income level. So turn it into an income stream for them could also be a benefit. And I think when you start to think about this, a lot of this is very personal and things you have to think about with your family situation. So depending on when you need to start planning, it depends a lot on your family situation. If you've had parents that have needed long-term care in their 70s, you're going to need to start planning in your 60s. If your mom and dad live to be 100 years old, you may have a longer time frame with this. So a lot of it's looking at your family situation, your parents, what they needed, and how genetics is going to play into this, how your lifestyle plays into this, and how your own personal health plays into this. While none of us know when we would need long-term care and those type things, there are at least ways we can start to think about it. So that way we're not completely clueless. I don't recommend people thinking about this, at 75, 80 years old. You definitely want to think about it before then. Like we talked about with the long-term care insurance, you definitely want to start thinking it way before you need it to make sure it's the valuable asset for you. But a lot of it is going to depend on your family situation. So, like we're talking about, what age? I think everybody needs to plan before age 70 for the most part, or 70 at the latest. Just because if you're wanting to plan for Medicaid protection or getting that long-term care, you do need to plan before you're 70. But looking at your individual family situation, your own personal health situation, kind of depends on when you really need to start planning. But I think it's important to think about this ahead of time. You can't do a good Medicaid plan and wait till you're 80 years old and need that nursing home care. So that kind of brings us to the question of what happens if I don't do any planning ahead of time and I need long-term care. So at that point, we look at considering it crisis planning. You may still do things to qualify for Medicaid, but you're not going to get as much protection as if you had pre-planned. So we can look at things like changing some assets into annuities and making them income streams. We can look at taking a penalty period, gifting some money away, taking that penalty period. We can look at promissory notes, which those are you loaning money to somebody else and then paying it back to you to create an income stream from an asset, as well as caregiver contracts, using some of your assets to pay your family members to take care of you during this time frame. Those are all things we can look at. Also doing things to get rid of some of our assets, like prepaying funeral expenses, doing upgrades to our home, like adding a bathroom that's more accessible, getting that new HVAC or that new roof. Those are all things we can do at crisis planning, but you're not going to get the best benefit or the most out of it to protect your assets. But just because you haven't planned doesn't mean you're not going to qualify for Medicaid, or there's not things we can't do to help you. It's just a different situation at that point. We have to look at it differently. So one thing I did, everybody wants to know what their house, how to protect their house. Your house is an exempt asset, but it could have a lien placed on it if you don't plan ahead for your house. So a lot of things we can use are things like a life estate deed, possibly, which means I own it for my life and it goes to my children at my death, or looking at putting it in irrevocable trust. So your house would not be an asset Medicaid could put a lien on, but we do have to do it before that penalty period to make sure you get the most protection for your assets. So what are we talking about with our long-term care planning tools? Things like irrevocable trust that we do over 5 years in advance from where you need it. And each irrevocable trust has its own different complexities, like who is the beneficiary, who's going to get income for life, who will get income at death. And it depends on those things that each individual situation. But that's definitely a tool we can use. Life estate deeds for houses. Long-term care insurance is definitely a tool you may want to consider for long-term care planning. And then if we get into that crisis planning, we can look at things like annuities. So that would be taking your assets and turning it into an income stream with an actual Medicaid qualified annuity. Those do have to be specially done. We just got a question, are IRAs considered exempt assets? It depends. If you have turned them on to where they're your income stream, they count as income, so they don't count as an asset. So it counts as part of your income stream, but not your asset. So it's kind of counts, but it depends how it is. If you haven't turned it on and you're not getting those required RMDs and those type things, it would count as an asset. So it depends on what area you are with it. But it is going to count in some way. We just have to see where you are with the IRA. But looking at the other things, the gifting strategies, we can use these ahead of time too, or in crisis planning and caregiver contracts. I think it's important to know that planning for long-term care, whether you're planning to use Medicaid or not, there are different things we can do to protect those assets. There are different things we need to look in, like the long-term care insurance. And I don't think there's one just set way to plan for long-term care. I think there's multiple prongs to the test, like having long-term care insurance, having this irrevocable trust, or using this life estate. And it each depends on the individual client and what they're looking for. that is pretty much the overview I want to give you today on long-term care planning. We'll get into some more details later on about Medicaid planning and a different webinar and go into a little bit more detail about those irrevocable trusts. But I just wanted to go over when you need to look at these things, what the possibilities are, and making sure that you know when you need to start planning. So at this point, if you're in your 40s and your parents are in their 60s to early 70s, it's a good time to start thinking about caring for your parents' long-term care. But if you're in your 60s, it's a good time to start thinking about it for you as well. And always with that long-term care insurance, the earlier you get it, the better the premiums are, and you're going to have a better time getting it as well, because sometimes you're going to get disqualified from long-term care insurance based on your age. But here's my contact information. I'm Lauren Ward again with A Business Law Firm. We're located at 1989 South Pine Street here in Spartanburg County. And my phone number, 864-699-9801, or my email, lew@abizlaw.com. And feel free to always reach out to me with any questions or comments or concerns. Or if anybody has any questions now, I'll be happy to answer a few of those. Well, it doesn't look like anybody has any questions, but if there's something you're uncomfortable asking in front of the group, please feel free to send me an email directly or give me a call, because I know this is stuff sometimes you don't always want to ask in front of other people. But I definitely enjoyed having you all here today. It is recorded. It'll be going on my YouTube channel and my LinkedIn. So please feel free to share with any family or friends. But I'm glad you all joined us today, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.